Our next session is the one that we all have been waiting for, which is She Leads the Future. Let's welcome our panelists for this very session. Ms. Prashanti Bodugum, Ms. Monika Sathe, and Ms. Sunaina K Kaul. Prashanti Bodhigam is the Vice President Technology and the Center Head at Walmart Global Tech India, Chennai. As the Center Head, Prashanti has a very critical role to play in enabling the long-term tech strategy for Walmart. In the last few years of UHG, Prashanti played a pivotal role in the evolution of capabilities and enabled senior leaders in driving the delivery ecosystem with stronger alignment to their business lines. Ms. Monika Sathe. Monika is a committed and a passionate professional with more than 20 years of successful industry experience in the healthcare sector with roles in various technical functions within operations, quality control, R&D, quality and compliance, and analytical chemistry. Sunaina K Kaul. Sunaina leads the employee relations and diversity and inclusion agenda for Qualcomm India. She's been a trusted advisor and a results-oriented senior level executive with 17 years of track record of successful strategies, HR leadership within the services and technology industries. She did her graduation in psychology honors and is an MBA HR. This very session is moderated by Poornima. Poornima is an HR and gender diversity leader with an experience of over 22 years. In her career with the corporate sector, she's worked in diverse industries like information technology, FMCG, and telecom. Her last leadership assignment was with IBM as a talent director for their domestic businesses. Prior to IBM, where she worked for a decade, she also worked with Indian and the international companies like Godrej, Airtel, and Stereo.
Hello everyone, my name is Poornima Parameswaran Batish, and it's my pleasure today to moderate this panel discussion on women in leadership. She leads the future. As you're aware, WiT Ignite is an initiative to enable women advance their careers, and powering women leaders is an integral part of this effort. Today, it's my privilege to host some stellar women leaders for this session. Let me start off by introducing our first panelist for today, Prashanti Bodhigam. She's the Vice President Technology and Chennai Center Head for Walmart Global Tech. Prashanti has over 23 years of experience in diverse technology leadership roles across geographies. Prior to Walmart, she's worked with the United Health Group and has spent a decade each with Capgemini and General Electric across US, UK, and India. She's led key transformation programs and supported clients in defining strategic roadmaps and structuring delivery services. Some of her key responsibilities are business management, client relationship, and global delivery, which also includes operations. Prashanti holds a master's in computer science from New Jersey Institute of Technology, US. Thank you, Prashanti, for joining us here today, and welcome to this session.
Thank you, Poornima. It's a privilege.
My next panelist is Sunaina K Kaul. She leads the Employee Relations and Diversity and Inclusion agenda for Qualcomm India. She's been a trusted advisor and a results-oriented executive with 17 years of track record behind her on leading successful strategic HR verticals within the services and technology industries. She's had exposure across all functions of HR and the opportunity to work with very best employer organizations, whether they are global or they are Indian. She's a psychology graduate with an MBA in human resources. Some of her core values are integrity, optimism, a solutioning mindset, inclusion and equality, but of course, the power of questioning, challenging the status quo, and not just making the business, but the world a better place for all of us to live in. Pleasure to host you today, Sunaina, and thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Poornima.
Our next panelist is Monika Sathe. She's a director with Johnson & Johnson. She leads their R&D efforts across their global consumer sites in Asia Pacific, Europe, and North America, across all product categories, including the OTC drugs. She's a scientist at the core with a breadth of business experience. She's a member of the J&J India Enterprise R&D Council. Monika, thank you so much, and it's wonderful to have you here today.
Thank you, Poornima. It's an honor to be here.
Wonderful. On that note, let's get started on the discussion and the theme today of She Leads the Future. Just to give our listeners and our viewers a bit of backdrop and context. India, as most of you probably already know, has amongst the highest number of girls graduating from colleges, but less than 20% of them make it to the workforce, which clearly explains our low representation of women in the workforce, which is just around 25% and is worse off in the STEM fields. And this leaky pipeline, due to conflicting career and life stages, further widens the gap which exists at the leadership level. Just to share with you, a recent Credit Suisse report quoted that only 15% of our board positions were held by women in India. And the global average isn't much better, but it's still a little better at 20%. And if you looked at the senior management roles, women in India accounted for just 8.5% of the senior management teams. And only 2% of our leaders are women CEOs. So that really is for want of a better word, an abysmal picture of the state of women leadership in India. My question in terms of this discussion is, as accomplished women leaders yourselves, what do you think needs to be done to change this landscape and have more women leaders in our workplaces, especially in STEM? Let me start off with Prashanti.
Sure, Poornima, that's a great way to start. While it's extremely important that we stay focused with STEM as the foundation for for any girl growing up and trying to pick a role from a technology career growth. It's also very important for everyone to understand that the technology itself is changing at a very, very rapid pace. The technical skills that I grew up probably are no longer in existence, right? I mean, and it's also expected that in the next decade or so, the demand for professional skills are going to be very different from what it is today. So if I have to look at this problem at three different stages, the early stage of the career of a woman, it's extremely important that we stay ahead of the competition and stand out from the crowd. And for this, it's important to upskill and gain knowledge on some of the emerging trends or technologies like AI, machine learning, big data, blockchain, and so on and so forth, right? And it's also important to kind of understand the foundation, which is the development tools, the programming language, and the operating systems to start with. Interestingly, a survey found out that 60% of women and 40% men possess high decision-making and creative thinking skills when they start the careers. However, apparently the tables turn or get reversed as they climb the corporate leader or the corporate ladder for every one of them. Why is it so? It's because I think at a mid-level, it's important that what we learn in the growing stage of the career, we start learning a little bit of the adaptability or agility to learn and unlearn and start taking, a very, calculated risk in terms of, what you want to do. And it becomes much more so as you get into senior positions, especially with the core technology foundation. Then it all becomes softer skills, something that can help you be resilient and put your experience at the forefront. And for that, it's extremely important that we build on life skills or the soft skills, where it becomes important for us to bring in effective collaboration, our ability to influence people, showing empathy, our ability to take decisions, faster, so that the team can go along with you. So at every stage, it's a very different skill. It's about our openness and our agility to learn them and continue to stay focused and grow.
Thank you so much, Prashanti, for those views. And I think that turning the tables at a certain stage of our careers, I think is a very strong phenomena, like you mentioned, and possibly a cause of a lot of cause for the leaky pipeline, as well as lack of leadership as well. That's a great perspective. So, Nena, what would you say to this landscape challenge?
Taking on cues from what Prashanti said, I think very well articulated. I think a couple of things in my perspective, what will really help is, if I can go point wise, I think would be career connections, where people really leverage their network to advance their careers and get guidance. Challenging the stereotypes, where you're really seeking opportunities in face of typical stereotypes. For example, women get more emotional, they are less decisive, expectations are often set lower. I mean, these are just basic certain stereotypes which we take into account in case they are going through a particular life event. I think the other interesting piece would be to really look at future ready skills. I think we have enough data that tells us that women are underrepresented in roles that are growing the fastest. For example, STEM, and a digital society is a dynamic one. So the new technologies which will enter the marketplace, creating the new skill and the new roles as fast as the others kind of disappear. I think the other piece to my mind which comes is equipping them to overcome and navigate individual and transitional barriers. With individual barriers, I would talk really about self-promotion, personal and life commitment, the societal expectations, awareness, and the transitional barriers would be in terms of, how is it that they're leveraging their support network? How do they manage issues, as well as, showcasing resilience? I'm sure we all have heard this often, that women meet more resistance and are more isolated as they move up the ranks. So strategic negotiation and stakeholder management skills would definitely be a key as they go ahead and transition and they move up the ladder, and they're managing their careers.
And Sunina, very well put out. Stakeholder management is possibly one of the areas that at least many women don't seem to have done well, or they think there is a lot to do there. And that possibly is one key to unlocking the doors to the leadership stage there. Monika, what about you? What do you think about this problem and how we could solve it?
So I feel that supporting and encouraging women to aspire and step up for more challenging roles requires a company-wide mindset change, which is driven from the top. And I totally agree with Prashanti that as women transition through different phases in life, trying to integrate work and changing personal priorities, it's very critical that companies realize that women need flexibility to adapt to these circumstances as well. And I also totally agree that, it's a digital ever-changing world. And in STEM, it demands new skills, innovative mindset, and evolution of roles to add greater value to what we deliver each day. So again, it's very important that we provide women the educational and training resources necessary for them to develop new skills, and sponsors or mentors that can improve their opportunities and network. If I speak for myself, I can never imagine doing my current role without the development interventions and learning programs, not only from my company, but also those which I pursued on my own. So this needs to be a combination of a very clear organizational strategy about where to progress women and encouraging women to own their self-development journey. And one of the J&J initiatives, Wisdom 2D, is aimed at increasing the representation of women in science and technical fields by creating inspiring moments to honor women in STEM 2D as role models and mentoring women throughout the different stages of their lives.
Right. Monika, thanks for bringing out that organizational construct and the importance of that to enable this. While I did hear you saying that self-motivation and will is key, but in an enabling environment is what I heard you saying, which accelerates this entire process. Thank you so much for those great insights and views. Sunaina, I'd like to ask you the next question. Specifically in view of the last few months, the world has changed. We've all experienced the pandemic. There have been many conversations, or I would say some ironic ones, some memes, lots of things going around, how women-led countries in the world or states have fared better in dealing with the crisis, and how women have led from the front in all these governments and state leadership spaces. As an HR leader, what do you think is the impact of women leaders in their respective workplaces?
So I think pandemic has, it's, while I see that being taken as an adversity, but I think couple of pieces or behaviors or the skills which came out were, which were also considered fairly important, were in lines of courage, resilience, integrity, and confidence. I think these were four traits that we were really talking about. People who showed these kind of behaviors were definitely a lot more successful while dealing with the pandemic, whether it was managing their families or their work. And I feel all these four traits come very naturally to women, whether you're talking about having the emotional strength, ensuring that they are able to accomplish team goals amidst any kind of opposition, or having to resolve to take any risks, even if no one else, would agree. In terms of resilience, I think there were folks who were able to overcome the negative perception and the expectations, and getting up after they've been put down. The other piece would be related to integrity, of having the moral compass and doing the right thing, where they were really managing work as well as home at the same point in time and doing absolutely a stellar job there. And I think this somewhere led to confidence, to saying, believing in themselves and the team, asking for help at the same point in time, ensuring that any kind of biased portrayals or unwarranted criticism were really given away. So I think absolutely a phenomenal place, where women could lead from the front, and at least that's what I have witnessed in our organization.
Wonderful. And I like some of those, some of those words. Resilience, I think, is something that's really emerged out of this. Like the saying, you've kind of been through the fire, and the best pieces are out there, right? They've been through that entire process. Courage, of course, is a critical thing, and we've seen women demonstrating that. Monika and Prashanti, would you have anything to add to what Sunaina said in terms of the impact of women leaders in their workplaces, specifically during this pandemic?
Okay, I think 2020 has been an exceptional year. And if I speak for women working in STEM and in essential services sector like us, it was resiliency at its peak. Because not only they managed their home affairs amidst the lack of support systems, but also reported to work and contributed immensely to business continuity and ensured with their male colleagues that there are no major disruptions to services. Of course, we also need to thank our male counterparts who supported us during this period, especially those who rose to the occasion and contributed to family chores and also displayed empathy and understanding at the workplace. I think, like everyone, it also made women build new skills, new ways of working, and expressing gratitude for the good things in life which were missed during the pandemic. So, the pandemic showcased that when it comes to courage and putting their best foot forward in the challenge, women led from the front along with their male counterparts.
Great, Monica. Thanks for those inputs. Prashanti, what do you think?
Sure. Nicely articulated, both Sunaina and Monika. Just to add, I think, one of the key things that we all agree probably is that, there are quite a few qualities that come natural to us, right? Empathy, humility, trying to be inclusive as leaders, particularly women leaders. I see more inclusiveness, our ability to communicate effectively. All of these kind of make us really natural leaders. And in midst of this pandemic, I think one of the key things that I have, probably had eye-opening, realization is how good we are in terms of leaning in and supporting each other. Uh, Within the organization, I've seen many women step forward, talk through some of those vulnerable moments with their women colleagues. It almost was the same for everybody, right? I mean, it didn't matter you're a leader or you're a developer, just coming together to say, hey, this is, I have done, cooking the whole day today and I'm so tired, just having that conversation and being vulnerable about it, accepting it and saying, I couldn't focus as much on my work. I don't think, we ever said things like that. And the beauty was that, the managers, the male managers, like Monika, you said, they understood it for the first time. And there was no bias towards that. Very early on, I was very very grateful to see some of the men managers come up and say, hey, we just want to acknowledge that, it's extremely difficult for you to manage your home and work, and don't let that impact you, because we are not going to kind of, come back and say, you did you didn't do a great job as much as a male colleague did, because, you had to handle all of this. Upfront, managers coming up and acknowledging it and saying, don't worry about it, we will look at it, with a perspective, kind of led a lot of women take that decision to stay back and work, because many of them almost were at the verge of literally giving up, because it was becoming very difficult for them to manage work, the child's education, and also the household activities. So leaders, especially women leaders, stepping up, rising up to this occasion, being vulnerable, talking about, what would happen in their own world, was exactly the same as their fellow women colleague, being a developer or middle management. Across the world, it just level set it. And I think it made it, a much more open environment for just everyone to come together, discuss it, and lean in to get that courage and move on. So great experience. While there were adversities, I think there's definitely a lot of positivity that came out of the pandemic. Poornima.
Right. Thanks, Prashanti. I think the way you put it is so insightful and amazing, because we heard courage, we heard resilience. I think vulnerability is such a critical aspect, specifically for women and women leaders, and the ability to be able to speak up about things. And like you said so rightly, for once, the other gender understood, and possibly because they were washing utensils, and they were possibly cleaning clothes, and in the absence of any domestic support, I think they were doing all the things which is traditionally aligned with the woman who's supposed to do 3 shifts, right? So when someone doesn't turn up, etc. So I think very beautifully put. So while there is a flip side, there have been challenges, but the ability to come out of that stronger, and maybe this is the right place for us to step up and take it forward. And this has given us that right conversation to have. Moving on, and I think both Prashanti and Monika mentioned this, and Sunaina, you said this earlier. There are a lot of things that women need to do for themselves. At the same time, they need to be supported and enabled by organizations as well. My question to you, and Prashanti, this one's for you. Are women themselves doing enough to raise the bar? And are organizations doing enough? Is it sufficient for us to change the game?
Compared again, I'm trying to compare to the past, because this was not heard of about organizations, taking a lot of effort in creating equal opportunities of employment, and being very conscious about it. But I think of late it's been so, so good to see every organization pretty much, taking it up and having some metrics and goals around it to, help grow their gender diversity and inclusion as well. Particularly in the IT sector, for example, many companies, including my own organization, Walmart Global Tech, there are a lot of strategies that have been put in place, and which are common across the board, right? I mean, these are all programs that help women, or encourage women, empower them to take up jobs and also progress in their careers, just not, career, but also leadership, right? Some examples, like even just getting a woman in the whole interview process, brings in a very different perspective to the way we, gauge or assess the candidates. I would say gender diverse candidates, right? Irrespective. there are a lot of thoughts, or a thought-provoking points that a woman brings to the table in that whole interview process. And actually, this has helped us hire more women because, it kind of created an opportunity to understand, how the candidate is addressing it from their perspective, right? And so that helped. Second, I think kind of giving benefits and training for women returning to work after a break. This has been extremely important to create that middle management layer, because many girls, they do very well. They get married, they go on a maternity break, and then they forget about coming back, right? So how do you encourage them to come back after a break is something that, is being consciously worked on. The third very important aspect is the, addressing the pay gaps. The first and foremost is, organizations have started talking about it, and managers are being extremely conscious about it, and they're trying to bridge that pay gaps and create an equal pay environment. That's so important, because that will start motivating women to think that yes, they are at par and they can, they can continue. Creating inclusive workplace policies. We just talked about it in our earlier conversation. There are many more inclusive workplace policies. And then most important is the mentorship programs. Outside in perspective, inside out perspective, having male leaders being the coaches to get in their perspective. That whole mentor-mentee circles which are happening internally and through organizations like WiT, there is so much of focus around it. That's really going to help. Long answer there from what organization or the ecosystem is doing. I think specifically coming to women, I see women, taking that or leaning into these initiatives. But what's more important is for them to start having a very clear focus with a 2 to 3 year agenda of what they want to be, and having a point of view about it, right? Being active in social media circles, kind of, move away from the inhibitions and start leaning in and saying, yes, I'm good at what I am, and let me just go continue to build on top of it so that I can become something tomorrow, right? That's going to be extremely important. And there needs to be a lot of focus around that. And I hope, we will very soon bridge that gap through different initiatives that, we are taking through organizations like WiT.
Wonderful, Prashanti. And I think the mentoring, the focus on middle management that you mentioned is so relevant. And in addition, you spoke about women having to stay sharp and stay focused. I think there are two sides of the coin, right? And both of them need to work well. Sunaina, what would you think both sides need to do?
I think I would agree to what Prashanti just shared. I think, if I really look at what would happen previously or the point when I started my career, I think if I really look at, the pieces which are available now, if I can just name a few are, supporting talent through the different life transitions that we just spoke about, where organizations are helping employee within manage their career track in parallel with the personal responsibilities. And typically, we do see high performing organizations that recognize, celebrating parenthood, encouraging the return to work after periods of leave has been critical to nurturing their talent pipeline as well, particularly for women. The other would be in terms of ensuring that the infrastructure is in place to support a more inclusive and a flexible workplace, which could mean physical spaces, it could mean the technology which encourages flexible working. While I think I do talk a lot about mentoring, but I think the other piece which to me personally has been extremely important is the sponsorship aspect, where you're really talking about developing women leaders, also about experiencing, how do they really tend to experience themselves in critical roles, and the mentorship support, are they really kind of getting that opportunity. And I think last but couple of things which I've seen organizations focus on is the unconscious bias in the workplace. And Prashanti just very beautifully spoke about the hiring practice. But I think unconsciously these practices are a little hard to change. There's probably a more stricter top-down approach which is required. The other piece which I feel is when we're really talking about any kind of women initiatives, there's a tendency where we tend to keep men and women separately. I think that entire piece for them to kind of collaborate and, to be able to drive the so-called women leadership charter will be super helpful. And, the intent that, how we come across and complement each other in a very time bound and a measurable way, I think is something which, I do look forward in times to come. And probably the change can start by, just the way how we think and how we talk. So in like when I was just talking, I spoke about a women leader, but when we talk about a man, it's simply a leader. So I do know of organizations and teams who are taking into account to say that there are certain words we are not going to really use, or there's certain way we are going to go ahead, interact and change behaviors. So definitely I think there's a lot which we can do, but what I really like is the fact that we have made that start.
Thank you so much, Sunaina. And I think it's I think the way you narrate, put that entire narrative so beautifully in terms of actually taking the unconscious, being aware of it, and bringing it to the fore, acknowledging it, and then correcting it in our own ways, both from an organization point of view and from a personal woman's point of view. Both these are so critical for this. Monica, over to you. I know you had mentioned something about Wisdom 2D. Any such focus areas or any other enabling infrastructure or other initiatives you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I think I agree that, and also admit that there are certain notable efforts by the organizations over the years. And what would continue to make a big difference would be actually a mindset shift at all levels of the organization, which would then create a culture that taps into our wide ranging ideas, our experiences, and talent. And I think by raising the bar on achieving that culture, we can give organizational initiatives that serious push, which they need to be the major change agents. So, for example, at J&J, the diversity competencies, which Sunaina so beautifully described, are no more nice to have, but are now stressed as fundamental abilities: lead, think, and act with a conscious intent of including everyone. So, how can we together work on the challenge of establishing a culture that helps women to self identify themselves as potential leaders? And when it comes to women raising the bar, if I speak for myself, very early in my career, the single most reason I used to shy away from taking a work challenge or a people management task would be the fear of judgment and the fear of failure. And there were times when others trusted my abilities, but I held limiting beliefs. But when I got an opportunity to attend an event like this, on women advancement in 2009, it completely changed the way I looked at taking on assignments and roles I had never done before. And I think it's very important for women to realize that we need to take it one step at a time, raise expectations from ourselves just a little, but also diligently acknowledge that we all are doing great jobs and keep an eye on becoming the best version of yourself. I think we do a lot of overthinking, but we should just reflect and be patient, because even as we focus on our career, our work, our, on the final destination at workplace, on positions and roles, the journey towards all this should also be enjoyable and worthy.
Wonderful, Monica, and I love the way you brought out those points of self-identification. I think we're all looking forward to the day when we'll see women raising their hands much more and in larger percentages, right? Prashanti had mentioned earlier the tables turn, and this is unfortunately one of the things that gets affected. Our hands start going lower and lower as we go so-called higher in the organization, right? And the process of judgment, the ability of women to overthink and overanalyze themselves and the situation, I think is legendary, and I think that comes a lot into the way we do stuff. So very beautifully put, and I think there is a so while we all called out a lot what the organizations need to do to step up. I think it's very clear and critical, and hearing you all just affirms it. Raising the bar is something that women also need to do for themselves. So thank you so much for those inputs. My next question is the classic ROI question, and in HR and diversity, I think we love this question every time. And we have two business leaders, and of course Sunaina, I'm sure, gets this very often as well. Sunaina, I'll start with you. How can we measure success, whether we are really moving the needle in terms of the leadership landscape? What do you think?
So I think data is something which is very critical to any and every organization. And when we look at data, I think we need to act on it with purpose. That is one. Secondly, I think there is, you can say there's less patience when it really comes to an ROI kind of a perspective in a very DNI space, because we want initiatives to be done as of yesterday. We want to show them as a success, etc. So for me personally, I think in a diversity and inclusion space, I think there are some matrix which are very clear and very defined. For example, a career development, initiative where we can actually see if a particular lady, or for that matter any employee, was given a stretch assignment. So then we, by the time we get onto the table and we are calibrating, did the person really show, you can say, behaviors or any kind of skills which we are clearly sure that takes that person up to the next level. That was one. The other, when we're really talking about inherent behavior, where we're really talking about addressing unconscious bias, we may not be able to measure it very, very strategically in terms of, how is it that we are really looking at what behavior changed, how much did the needle move. So I think you definitely, as an organization, you need to have a fine balance in terms of what is the culture and the value that you're looking at and how we aligning to that. The other perspective would be where we are really talking about very, very targeted programs, whether it's career conversations, whether it's mentoring, whether it is to say, okay, any stretch assignments or projects. So I think the moment you're able to strike a balance, you'll probably be able to ensure that you have a 3 or a 5 year strategy, and you'll be able to see whether that movement's happened or not. So at least that's how we are looking at it internally.
Okay. Now let's look at the other side. And Prashanti, as a business leader, what is your ask from an ROI perspective? What would you like to see moving on the ground?
So, Sunaina very rightly put it in terms of the metrics, right? End of the day, metrics matter. However, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That we hear it all the time. To me, this is exactly the same thing. If it is not ingrained into what we do every day, and if it is not bought in all the way to the grassroots level, and when I say the grassroots level, it starts at home, with a brother accepting the sister, to a father accepting a daughter, to a husband accepting a wife, and treating them as an equal partner, right? It has to bring in a change, just not at the work environment, but also across the across different aspects. That's when you can really call a country is flourishing, and that's the change we would like to see, which means it just has to become an inclusive process, and something probably the next generation is just not talking about it but living it to the fullest potential. So that to me would be how I would look at. But then, is it like a 2-year journey or a 5-year journey, is all up to how the organizations adopt and make sure that it becomes part and parcel of their lives.
Right. Monika, what do you think?
So, in one of our Women's Day celebration session, there was this random question: what do women bring to the table? An answer by one of our young women colleagues who just joined the organization fresh from the university. She said, everything, if you give us a chance. And this response had a notable impact on the group, and suddenly the room was filled with renewed confidence and hope. So, success, according to me, is exactly this confidence and hope in every woman, which would help to live the theme of this event: She Leads the Future. And I think success is also, of course, it's all about the metrics when it comes to organization strategy, but it is also about women who have climbed up the ladder. They help and encourage other women to accelerate their own progress by becoming strong mentors and positive influencers. It's that the other women don't have to learn the hard way and go through the same challenging experiences. They can learn from their colleagues. And success to me in my field of STEM 2D would be when young girls and women believe that the careers in the field of science and technology are possible for them as it is for their male counterparts. So its overall success is when women have just a greater belief in their own power as leaders and as contributors to the society.
Thank you so much, Monica. And to also put it, I think you put a lot of those things, Prashanti and Sunaina said also into the conversation. And I think that little, I would say not little, but the young girls comment is I think, is telling, right? We can really do anything. And I think the point about self-identification that you mentioned, so maybe assuming that others need to give you a chance changes over to say, can I take a chance? Is this organization enabling me to take a chance? Is I think the progress and the journey that we need to make. And I think I heard both the HR and the business side. So while the ROI is critical, metrics of success are key, there is a softer aspect to this, and it's a journey clearly that all of us recognize will take time, will take our investments in terms of our own commitment to it to really make a difference on the ground. Beautifully said. And I think this is a pet question. I think that almost all companies have, because the journeys have been long. What are we really bringing to the table? Those conversations that we've had about organizations and women are really about changing the landscape. As we close into the time for this session, I have the opportunity to interact with all of you amazing leaders, right? You yourself are leaders, and while I hate to use the word, but I'd love to say women leaders, because our topic is She Leads the Future, right? So coming back to each one of you individuals as leaders, you've all had amazing career journeys. Would you like to share a lesson or two or learnings from your own personal journey to the leadership with our audiences? Sunaina, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think if I look at my career, when I look back, I think there have been three very telling moments for me. The first one was when I became a mother. And I remember my father came home to see the child, and he said, "Are you sure you want to pursue your career?" And my husband just happened to enter the room at that point in time. And it was so elementary for my husband to say, "Why not? She's worked as hard. And why shouldn't she?" And I think after that, I think I got a lot of support from my parents, because they were coming from a generation that kids need support. So one was that. The second, which happened a few years back, when I got a great career opportunity, and my husband could really see that I'm excited about it, and he said, "You know what, we'll move." We had to move a city. He probably would have had to leave his job, which he did as well, but he said, "This is something that you want to do, and I want to support it." So that was the second aspect. And the third was, I remember when I had my second child, and I went back to work, and I think it was one of those days when you're kind of overwhelmed with the house responsibilities, and my manager came in and said, "Don't try to fix everything. You have everything. Look at your support." And I think these three moments have really been telling on me, because I think I was more confident. And what I liked is today I can take that forward. So I think for diversity, as you rightly put, Poornima, you really have to earn your stripes. And that's what I hear from Prashanti as well as Monica. It doesn't start when you really enter the workplace. It starts with who you are. And I feel very fortunate and blessed to have that opportunity to say that I can think and, kind of paint the career that I want to. So, yes.
Well, Sunaina, and I'm sure a lot of women listening and seeing this would resonate with those moments, and maybe some of those are the moments, inflection points as we call them, where things changed for them. And I think we hope that it does change for all of them, the better, like it did for you, right? Thank you so much for sharing that. Monica, what do you have to say in terms of your lessons, or any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share?
So what I have learned and experienced in my career is that we always rely on our academical, grades, our cleverness, our intelligence, and technical acumen, especially in STEM 2D. So we feel that it is the foundation for our success. But as you grow up the ladder, and I think Prashanti did mention about this, it is not enough to succeed. We also need to be smart. We need to have the mental strength. people management skills, and emotional intelligence to not only succeed, but sustain and survive. And as you can imagine, it can be very exhausting to constantly have to try and prove that you are good enough. So sometimes we just have to let it go, ask for help, and be proud of ourselves, celebrate small or big achievements. I think we also have enough assessors all around us in the form of family members or at the workplace who are constantly judging or stereotyping, or sometimes unconscious bias is at play. So let us not be too hard on ourselves. And I would like to share with you a concept I learned in a women's global development program, and it left a lasting impression on me. So, throughout our journey, we try to balance out three marriages: marriage to work, marriage to others, and marriage to self. And for many of us, the first two get all the attention they deserve, while the third one, marriage to self, is relatively ignored. So, we do need to focus on a healthy and happy me and dedicate our time to create a better version of ourselves so that we are able to enrich our work and life journey to the fullest. And as I said earlier, I believe that if we have greater belief in our own power, we can shape our lives, our organization, and also the society.
Wonderful, wonderful, Monica. I like those three marriages, and the way you portrayed the balance. Coming from a scientist, I think it makes such a big impact. Saying it's not just the hard technical skills that are important; it's all these other things that play a role in making us the leader that each one of us today. Beautifully said, and I do hope marriage to self is something that that people take away really, because self care and a lot of those conversations, I think, are really what take a woman ahead in our trajectory. Thank you so much, Monica. Prashanti, what would you say are your lessons or learnings from your journey?
I really like the way Monica called it out, right? The three marriages, and it's so important.
Absolutely.
Self always comes to the end. For me, it's always been about, am I happy doing what I'm doing? And do I really enjoy what I'm doing? Both of them, if you really start digging through, you will know it, because it doesn't come because you're taking the path that is least resistance. That only kind of makes it very monotonous. What's important is, are you taking up new challenges? Are you able to kind of use those opportunities to fail and learn to succeed? That's the key, right? I mean, how do we really learn from each one of those failures? How can they make you more resilient, more confident, and more more courageous in going and doing additional things that not only develop you but also grow you, both on the mental and professional front. After almost 2+ decades, I think it's only now that I'm understanding that the third marriage, which is about self, comes first. And there's more focus now, but I wish, if there is one message that I want to leave to the young girls out there, I think they should start looking about themselves first, look at what they want, and then see how rest of it almost falls in place. Because there are a lot of people that we have talked about in this whole conversation. They're ready to help you, achieve your goals that you want to. But it always starts with you.
Beautiful, Prashanti. And I think you've summed it up for all of us. It starts with you. It really starts there, because everything else can fall into place, provided, like I think Monica said earlier, you self-identify and you know that you have the abilities to take it forward and ask for help at right stages. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing thoughts, perspectives, and your leadership journeys. It's been a sheer pleasure to have all of you here today and learn so much, because it doesn't matter at what stage of your career you are at. All these are always lessons and nuggets I think each one of us takes back on a daily basis for ourselves as well. Thank you all for your time today, and thank you all for leading us into the next normal, or there's a CEO friend of mine who calls it the better normal. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Poornima. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prashanti, Monika, Sunaina, and Poornima for an enriching session.